Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about the Triumph of Horus, which has been translated / reconstructed by H.W. Fairman. Now, what's cool about the Triumph of Horus is that this is one of the oldest plays in world history. Sort of. The reason I say sort of is that this is a reconstruction of what we / Fairman think an ancient Egyptian ritual play might have looked like. But no one is entirely sure what these performances would have looked like when the ancient Egyptians put them on. The other element to this, and incidentally, I am getting over a cold, so if I sound gross in this video, that's why. I apologize. So the other element to this is that we don't know things like what ancient Egyptian music sounded like. We don't know what their the structure of their poetics would have been. So, for example, in different languages, there are different natural line lengths. In English, famously, the most natural line length is regarded as the iambic pentameter, which is why things like Shakespeare is written in iambic pentameter. Shakespeare plays, why sonnets are written in iambic pentameter in English, etc., etc. In French, the most natural line length seems to be, I think it's heptameter, which is it's an extra metrical foot beyond what it is in English, and so different languages have different sort of natural sounds for how things break, how things like poetry breaks. We don't necessarily know that for the ancient Egyptians, things like this. So this is a reconstruction. But it seems to be based on reasonably good evidence. I'm not an Egyptologist. I don't read hieroglyphics, so I can't sort of personally verify that. But based on what the editors of this, Simon Gikandi and R.N. Sandberg, say, it seems like this is regarded as a reasonably good translation. So the basic story of the Triumph of Horus is kind of in the title, right? So in ancient Egyptian mythology, one of the most famous stories is the conflict between Osiris and Horus on the one side and Seth on the other. So Osiris is the brother of Seth. Osiris is initially, I think, some kind of like god of life, fertility, something like that. I can't remember exactly. Set is a sort of death god figure, and he defeats Osiris in battle. He kills Osiris, and Osiris's wife, Isis, in different versions, sometimes has to collect the dismembered pieces of Osiris, something like this, and she resurrects him, at which point Osiris becomes a god of the underworld, not in a sort of negative hell type way, but in a, like, the afterlife type way. Following the defeat of his father, Horus decides that he is going to avenge Osiris's death, and so he battles Seth, and he wins. During the course of that battle, Horus loses an eye, which is not really dramatized in Triumph of Horus, but that is a sort of important element of the myth because the Eye of Horus becomes an important symbol in Egyptian culture, a symbol of protection. And is still used today. And there's variations of it. The Eye of Ra is another basically version of it. Eye of Tot is another version of it. But Horus defeats Seth. One of Seth's sort of avatars is the hippopotamus, and that is sort of the villain of this play. And when I say villain of, I mean there's a lot of violence against hippopotami. I don't know whether these would have been real hippopotami that were being ritualistically sacrificed in the course of this play. I think when Fairman restaged this in the 70s, I think, probably they were not killing large numbers of hippopotami, but basically the entire first act is five variations. So we actually open with a prologue, and one of the things that Fairman includes is these depictions of wall reliefs. So this one, for the prologue, sorry. So in the background of is the pylon of the temple of Edfu. In the center of the stage is a replica of the sacred lake of the temple, and on it a boat. The relief evidently depicts two phases in the development of the action. First, to the right of the lake stand Tot with the reader, not depicted in the relief, beside him. Beyond them are Horus the Beditite, Horus Lord of Mesen, not depicted in the relief, and Isis. To the left of the lake stand the king, wearing the headdress of Odurus and holding a harpoon in his hand, and the queen, not depicted in the relief. The reader holds a scroll of papyrus from which he reads. In the second phase, Horus the Beditite, holding a rope in his left hand and a harpoon in his right, and Isis will board the boat. The prologue basically consists of extended ritualized introductions to the major characters of the play. Horus in his two different variations, Horus the Beditite and Horus of Mesen, both of which are involved in the action of the first act. Tot is introduced, Isis is introduced, so the king is introduced. So that's the prologue. But then Act 1 is basically 5 variations on a theme. And that theme is the 2 versions of Horus, each harpoon a hippopotamus in a different portion of its anatomy. The snout... Sorry. The snout, a couple of different places in the head, the back, the butt, and the feet, the legs, the genitals, the stomach, over the course of these 5 different variations. Each of the Horuses is supported in this by a demon. The demons have different heads. The first ones are a baboon-headed demon and another demon, just sort of nondescript, I guess. In scene 2, they're both bull-headed demons. So you get these sort of variations. I think there's lion-headed demons at one point, different ones. And they're basically there to be like, yeah, I'm backing you up, Horus. I'm going to kill your enemies. I'm going to devour them. I will eat their entrails. nobody's going to fuck with you while I'm around. And then looking on, I'm sorry. And then looking on over all of this is the king, who basically just sort of applauds what's going on. The, again, ritualized killing of these hippopotami that represent Seth. When you get to Act 2, basically this is sort of celebration of the defeat of Seth. And so we have a different approach to the temple reliefs. We have the chorus saying at the beginning of Act 2, "Come, let us hasten to the pool of Horus, that we may see the falcon in his ship, that we may see the son of Isis in his war galley, like Ra in the bark of the morning. His harpoon is held firmly in his grip, as in that of Horus of the mighty arm. He casts and drags, that he may bring captive the hippopotamus, and slay the lower Egyptian bull. Rejoice, ye inhabitants of Retribution Town, alack, alack in Karaga." And so this is one of the things... I'm sorry, I really am. So this is one of the things... there are a lot of references here to proper names, whether these are places, whether these are people, whether these are groups or tribes or something like this, that are not particularly clear necessarily. Probably would have been easily meaningful to the original audiences, but they aren't necessarily meaningful today. So, like this reference to Karaga, or Karga, Khargeh. And there are some footnotes in here that sort of explain some of the elements of it, but not that many. And so it does seem to be that there's a lot here that's just unclear by its very nature. Scene 2 of Act 2, there's only 2 scenes in this one, basically depicts a sort of ritualized repetition of the entire action of the play. So the first portion of 2-2, the chorus sort of, honors Horus, and then Horus talks about his battle with the hippopotamus, that is Set, and then ritually thrusts his harpoon into the head of a hippopotamus. He then embarks on a boat and seats himself on a throne. Top takes position behind him. These are stage directions I'm reading here. And then we get essentially the coronation. And Horus says, "I am Horus the Deity, great god, lord of the sky, lord of the upper Egyptian crown, prince of the lower Egyptian crown, king of the kings of Upper Egypt, king of the kings of Lower Egypt, beneficent prince, the prince of princes. I receive the crook and the whip." And then Horus is given the crook and flail. "For I am the lord of this land. I take possession of the 2 lands in assuming the double diadem." And Horus is crowned with the double crown, the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, the famous sort of symbol of the Pharaoh's power over all of Egypt. "I overthrow the foe of my father Osiris as king of Upper and Lower Egypt forever." So again, we have this sort of ritualized coronation. And this is associated by extension with the Pharaoh. Because Horus is closely linked to the king, or the Pharaoh, in this play, throughout the play itself. And so what ends up being the central focus of this is Horus has defeated Set. The Pharaoh has defeated Set, has defeated the evil one, the villain of mythology, and therefore the ruler is legitimate. The Pharaoh deserves to be Pharaoh because he is ritually aligned with Horus, the good who defeats the evil. And so it's very much a socially conservative play in that sense. And this is very standard for Egypt. Part of the reason that Egypt had such a long and stable civilization was because they were very socially conservative. Not in the sense of like modern conservatism, particularly not conservatism in the US, which is really more about impressing a radical ideology against reality, but conservative in the sense of sort of Burkean conservatism, basically, where they had a social system that largely functioned to establish stability and keep order within the society, provide for people's basic needs for the most part, and it worked extremely well. There wasn't a massive need for social change for the most part, although obviously over its 3,000 some year history, ancient Egyptian civilization did undergo changes, but there wasn't really need for massive radical change for the most part. And so this play, this ritual, functions as a kind of ideological state apparatus, as Louis Althusser would put it, reinforcing that social order because it was a social order that worked for them.